Hi, welcome to Slideshow. My name is Dave Hayward. I'm the founder of Europa Creative Partners. This is the second in a series of three podcasts made up of a chat that I had with Ed Ortega, who is an AI strategist and educator. He's the founder of Machine and Partners. So if you haven't listened to episode 1 of this series, which is episode 3 of Slideshow, I highly recommend you go back and either watch it or listen to it. I would say that probably watching is superior to listening because we do a live demo in all of these 3 episodes. So it's quite visual. Without further ado, I'm going to jump straight into the action and enjoy.
All these tools that are available via ChatGPT are also available to us as developers. And so, we can concoct our own applications based on these multimodal tools. So if we want to do voice in, if we want to do image out, if we want to do image analysis or, writing code, all these things are available to us. So it's like sky's the limit. And that's why I say there's no playbook yet. We're still figuring it out. We're still figuring out how to achieve maximum value from all these tools. And I think we've got years and years to go before, we have a solid playbook where people go, oh, you want to do this? This is how you do it. Right now, it's like, oh, you want to do that? Seems like it's possible. Let's go see if we can figure it out.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of the of an earlier talk that you gave when you were here in New Zealand. You were talking about how the early days of web, when no one knew what a website looked like. So it was sort of like, and now there's a kind of I guess there's an expectation when you come on a site, you know what you're looking for, you know to go to the hamburger at the top right and all that sort of stuff. But that took years to synthesize and to settle, basically.
Yeah, it's almost embarrassing for me to talk about how old I am and how I remember the very first days of websites where companies had brochures. They had
Yeah.
paper, and they would send them to you or you would pick them up somewhere. I don't know. Um, it's crazy to think about, but like that's how they talked about themselves. And there was brochure designers and there was brochure infrastructure, and you just like this is how companies communicated there. And so when the first websites came out, it was like take my brochure and put it on the web. And there was software that would convert print documents into
Yeah.
websites, right? That which
So
made
true.
sense somehow, but we quickly got past that because these are two different mediums that have two different needs and two different capabilities and stuff. We're seeing the same thing now, where it's like, okay, now we've got AI. How do we use AI? What's the natural way to use AI? What's the right way to use AI? There isn't an answer, right? We're figuring it out. We're in that brochure phase where we're trying to put brochures on the web, but
Yeah.
that's not the optimal way to do it.
And also picking off something else that reading your newsletter release notes, of course, a little plug there, was when you talked about how the AI transformation is totally different to digital transformation. It's actually not. It's in some ways digital transformation was that kind of analog idea where you took a process and you kind of simulated it digitally. That's a very, very rough way of describing it, but AI transformation is kind of radical.
Yeah, I think the ability of AI to cognate, to think, it really changes the game. And it's hard for us to get our head around just how powerful that capability is. And so our first, inclination is to reproduce the workflow with AI. But if you've done it enough times, if you do that enough times, you'll start to see, oh, actually, what happens eventually is you kind of jump over that workflow. You don't need that workflow. The workflow transforms and it becomes something else because AI can do so much in there that the inputs and the outputs are no longer relevant, from the old process. So we can talk about concrete examples or whatever, but and I think like that's actually a good segue into sort of the next step of the gap, which is some of these, some of these vertical tools, right? I was evaluating an AI accounting tool, and you just plug in your bank account into the tool and it looks at all your transactions and it automatically categorizes them and it automatically tells you about things that are going on. It just has all this intelligence, and it's like thinking like a bookkeeper and thinking like an accountant based off all of your transactions. And you email it your invoices, you email it, anybody who's sending you, payments or invoices. It just handles everything. Then when you pull up the application and it has a list of all your things, you can click on one of those things and you can ask it about that thing, right?
Oh
you can say, what this is in the wrong category. And it's like, sorry, I'll fix that. And it goes and recategorizes all your stuff. Or you can say, what's the expectation of this category of tools? And it'll say, oh yeah, so you've been growing this much, that's going to be this much this year, this much next year. It just has all this intelligence built into the system. So you don't need an accountant, you don't need a financial planner, and they still have humans in the loop. So if you kind of have a really tough question, you can reach out to a finance person who will then go look at your books and stuff. But it's a whole different way to do accounting, right? And because you've got all this AI everywhere, it just changes the way you do it. So now, I'm much more on top of the finances, whereas before I used to have to go to the bookkeeper or go to my CFO and say, hey, let's talk about this. Now, most of that I can just do through the tool, and it's only the highest level stuff that I'm talking to the CFO about, for some real long-term planning or some strategic stuff. And that's as it should be, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't want to spend all her time talking about transactions and, miscategorizations and stuff like that.
Do you really need to drink that much coffee, Ed? That sort of thing,
Exactly.
So that kind of nicely brings us to the next thing that we were going to have a look at, which I think we're going to have a jump on to some automation. Is that right?
Yeah. So the next set of tools that is filling in the gap are these workflow automation tools, and there's a bunch of them. There are ones that are more technical, like N8N and Pipedream, and then there's ones that are kind of in the middle, like Make.com, Relay, Gumloop. Those are a little bit more accessible, and they're just coming out of the woodwork. There's a million of these. If you go online and look for AI automation tool, you'll just find so many. They all basically do the same thing. And what are they trying to do? With ChatGPT, you can't integrate with your current systems, right? You can't connect to you can't connect it to Slack. You can't connect it to Gmail. So it's like, well, I want AI to read my email and do something. It's like, well, you're out of luck. And so, well, maybe I can use Gemini. No, Gemini kind of sucks at that, right? And so you're kind of out of luck. So these new tools, these automation tools, what they've done is they've essentially built Zapier. If you know Zapier, it's an automation tool pre-AI, and they've just added AI to that mix. So now what you can do is you can get data from anywhere, you can send it anywhere, you can process it by any means, and it's like the sky's the limit as far as like your imagination. There is a limit actually to like what you can do, because sometimes you just need like programming, or you need a database, or if you want to have interactions, like to build a real life app or whatever, they're not that great at that. They're really good if you have data coming in one end and you have data coming out the other end, and you basically just need to do a lot of processing of that data. So right. Can I show an example?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So this is an app called N8N. I know it's kind of small. Let's see if I can. And so what this does is it allows me to do this node-based building. So you see all these little nodes. Each of these nodes is some action that I'm going to take on data. And as I move along from left to right, what I'm doing is I'm building a bigger data set. So on the left here, I've got a trigger. So what this tool is, I can't keep up with the AI news, right? There's just too much. And if I read every newsletter that I get from the AI blogosphere or whatever, I'd be spending 4 hours a day reading through all these articles and stuff. So at some point I was like, this is just too much. I can't keep up, and I need something that can summarize this stuff for me. So in the old days, pre-AI, I would have hired an assistant or had someone, a human being, and I would say, hey, read through all the news every week and send me a summary at the end of the week that talks about the most interesting stuff that's going on in AI, right? And of course, that would have probably taken that person all day to read all the newsletters, categorize the information that's in there, summarize it in some succinct way, find some insights, generate a report, and then email that to me, or create a document or something, right? That would have been like an 8-hour process, I'm guessing, something like that.
So what we're essentially doing is taking newsletter analyst's job and putting them in the way of the sort of the boilermaker or whatever the
Eh,
coppersmith.
let's also just face facts. Like, that would have been an awful job,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah,
I
that
mean,
is
just
right.
terrible. Yeah.
Yeah,
So what this automation does is it has a trigger every week. It gets triggered. So this you can have other kinds of triggers. You could have an email, like an email could be a trigger. A Slack could be a trigger. I could send a Slack to this thing and have it start some automation. Um, Anything you can imagine, adding a row to a database, someone filling out a form on your website, like all kinds of things could be triggers for these kinds of automations. In this case, it's just a schedule. So every week, this thing gets fired off. And then what it does is it goes to my Gmail account and it reads my email. And specifically, it's looking for emails that have a label on them that say AI news. So in Gmail, I configured it so that anything that's coming from certain sources is automatically labeled AI news. And so this just reads, over the last week, give me all of the email that I've gotten that is from the AI news label. So I can show you what that looks like here. So Gmail account, the resources message, get many messages. I'm only saying 10 because I wanted to kind of keep the overhead low.
right.
The label is AI news here, and it received after, and this is basically JavaScript code that I've put in here that calculates like 1 week from today, 1 week
Yeah,
previously from today. So a little bit of JavaScript, and then it will output that information. And that data then goes to the next step. So in the next step, what I'm doing is I'm just taking all of the messages that came from Gmail, I'm squeezing them together into one list. So it's got message, and I'm only pulling out the text part of the mail message, because a mail message actually has HTML and has headers and it has all this crap in it. I don't want that. I just want the text. So I'm pulling out the text and the source, and I'm aggregating that together. And then I do a little bit more massaging of that data to get it into a nice format. And then I send it to OpenAI. And here I have an assistant that I wrote. It's an OpenAI API assistant. It's like a custom GPT on steroids. And what I'm telling it to do is read through all those emails. And when you read through the email, just find the blurbs in each email, because you know how a newsletter is. It has a bunch of stuff at the top that's general, and then it's like, okay, here are the news items for the week or the day or whatever, and then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So what I'm telling OpenAI to do is just get rid of all that other junk and just give me the news items, and pull out the URL that links to the article, pull out the title, pull out the blurb that describes it. And I want you to also categorize these into, is it ethics news? Is it a new product? Is it robotics? Is it deep science? So I have a list of categories that I wanted to break these into, right? So it does that. And then once it gives me that list, I actually then have it rewrite the list by category, because what I want it to do eventually is for each category, I want it to write a summary for me. What I do here is I actually send this to a database. So I'm actually saving all of the blurbs into a database, because I think later I might want to do some data analysis on like the AI news over the whole year or over a quarter or something like that. And I think that would be interesting. So I thought it might be fun to just save all that data that I'm extracting into a database for later.
sort of like trend analysis or something like that, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So then what I do is I then send the categorized blurbs into this model and I say, okay, read for each category, read the blurbs, read the news items, and generate a summary of like what happened, in this category this week. And then do a deeper dive in there and try and do a little analysis, like try and find some insights in there. Is anything interesting happening? Develop a point of view on that. So I want the AI to do a little bit of extra thinking for me. So for the first model that I used, I actually used ChatGPT 4.1 Nano. It's the fastest, lightest, but least capable of the 4.1 models. I used that to extract the news items because it's not a heavy thinking task. But for this one, I'm using ChatGPT 4.1 straight.
Yeah.
It's a very capable model, and so it's very good at doing some of this analysis and synthesis and stuff. I want this one to be a lot smarter when it does this job. Okay, once it does its job, I then tell it to create a Google Doc and give it a name with the date, and then populate the doc with whatever information came out of the AI, right? And then send me a Slack message and tell me that you did this, so I know that doc exists, and then I can go look at it, right? Yeah. So let's look at the doc. Okay, so here's the output. So it's in Markdown. I couldn't figure out how to make it look nicer, but essentially here's one category, science and research. Here's the summary. OpenAI's latest O3 model improves over its predecessor and benchmark scores, blah, blah, blah. What's the synthesizing idea? The evolution of AI models is increasingly shaped by the demands of real-world applications, right? So it's doing a little bit of a deeper analysis on this. So then I also asked it to append to the end of the document all of the articles that it found. So for science and research, there's one article. For business news, there's one article. For robotics, there's one article. So that must have been what was like the most recent articles that came through in my newsletter when the last time I did this test. I'm giving it so much source material that I'm not asking it to do anything novel. I'm just asking it to kind of process the data that I'm giving it. So risk of hallucination here is low, but I do want to, just in case I want to go like vet those articles or read them, or if this sparks an idea for an article or a newsletter or something, then I might want to go to the source and kind of look at that more deeply, and not just let AI write my newsletter for me or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. This all feels achievable, right?
Very achievable. I mean, I think there's some places where you might need to write like the different tools have different capabilities and make it easier and or harder to do things. So the more control you want, the more technical skills you need, because like in N8N, I can put a code node anywhere in there, and that gives me the full power of JavaScript. Right. So essentially, I can put a code node in there, and I can do anything I want to that data to move it to the next node. Yeah. Other tools, like if you look at, I think Relay is really nice, or Make, or Gumloop. Like those ones are a little more user-friendly. They're a little bit more drag and drop. They help you along a little bit more. I think you just have to find the one that fits you best and your capabilities. And you might find in some of those that you get blocked for whatever reason by something, and that's usually a sign that you're going to have to like learn a little bit of code.
That's the end of episode 4 of Slideshow. Of course, this is the second episode of this 3-episode series. So the next episode, which is episode 5, will be the last in this series of talks with Ed Ortega, where we're going to do a demo of vibe coding. Very, very cool. So stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for listening. If you could like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. And a big thank you to Ed and to the Europa Creative Partners teams. You guys are awesome. Thank you.